Hello and welcome to the Say It Sister podcast. I'm Lucy and
I'm Karen, and we're thrilled to have you here. Our paths crossed years ago on a shared journey of self-discovery, and what we found was an unshakable bond and a mutual desire to help others heal and live their very best lives.
For years we've had open, honest and courageous conversations, discussions that challenged us, lifted us and sometimes even brought us to tears. Now we want to share those conversations with you. We believe that by letting you into our world, you might find the courage to use your voice and say what really needs to be said in your own life.
Whether you're a woman seeking empowerment, a self-improvement enthusiast, or someone who craves thought-provoking dialogue, join us as we promise to bring you real, unfiltered conversations that encourage self-reflection and growth.
So join us as we explore, question and grow together. It's time to say it, sister. Hello, it's so great to be back with you, Karen. And before I let you speak, I just want to say how excited I am about talking about this topic, because it's a topic that me and my daughters talk about all the time. And this is the everyday sexism, the casual sexism that we're all encountering every single day. And I think I probably got a little bit complacent about it because I've lived with it for so long, but now they're going out there in the world and encountering it for the first time. They're absolutely outraged. And so I want to give myself credit because they're educated around this stuff. They can spot it because I've raised them to be that way. But I didn't have that. So when it was happening to me, I just didn't know. And there are some ridiculous things that are said, done, experienced, some completely absurd, and some downright awful things that happen that are just so casually dropped in there that it stops us in our tracks, but we just let it carry on. We don't do anything about it, but we feel it inside. We feel like somebody's played an off key on the piano. You notice it, but then you just carry on with the music. So I want to celebrate myself to start off with for raising daughters who are aware of this. And yeah, I'm just wondering, where are you with it all?
This is a really hard one for me because it took me down a rabbit hole. I wondered why I was just disconnected from the topic, and I kept thinking, I know this is everywhere. I have experienced it on multiple levels across many years. It's not really my life today because of the phase and stage I'm in and because of my choices that I make. However, I experienced it a hell of a lot when I was a lot younger, and there was a part of me that didn't want to open it back up. They didn't want to go into it because of the wounding that sits within the space of everyday sexism. It's something that as women we grow up with, we live with, we learn to navigate through in a way. But it's like one of those things, just because it happens doesn't make it right. And so for me, there's a lot that came up, but it took me a few days to just even be able to sort of look at the topic itself and go, ooh, what is this about? What is this topic doing to me right now as a 48-year-old woman? And how do I feel about it today versus how I felt about it, when I was younger? And I'd honestly say I still feel pretty disgusted. The feeling is still the same. However, I'm more grown up now, so I can talk about it from a different place.
Yeah, and for me, I look back and I think, how absurd is it that I let these everyday sexisms happen? I didn't speak up. And so I can't go and change the past. But what I absolutely can do is empower my daughters and empower all of the daughters out there listening who are about to go out there into the world. And we together will hopefully educate and share some of our thoughts with the mothers, the parents, the mentors out there so that they can help break these everyday casual sexisms. But I'm assuming everybody knows what we're talking about. And so if you don't understand what we're talking about, I'm just going to give you a few examples that me and my daughters brainstormed last night. So the biggest bugbear they had yesterday was these teeny tiny pockets in their jeans. And how come girls only get jeans that will hold maybe a lipstick, whereas boys get these big jeans that hold their wallet and their phone and their keys, because clearly girls don't need pockets. And then that it's kind of like the catcalling, but in a not so overt way, where somebody says, "Oh, go on, give us a smile, darling." And it's just like, ugh, really? Um, and then, do you know what? When I was younger, um, it came to me, this example, but I was kind of being a bit bullied, teased, harassed a little bit by a boy when I was in primary school. So I'd have probably been about 8, 9 years old. And I told the teacher, and the teacher just said, "Oh, don't worry, it's because he likes you." And just like, okay. But clearly that's just everyday sexism. It's that casual sexism. Um, and then my nan asked me when I went to university, she said, "Oh, okay, so if you got married, would you give it up? Would you just, you know?" And I was like, "What? I know I'm going to university for me, not to find a husband, not to as a backup plan because I wasn't married yet." Um, and I can forgive her because she was of a generation. And then a really horrible one was when I got a promotion in my late 20s, and I heard the jokes, well, they were overt, like, "Oh, what did you have to do to get that promotion?" And clearly meaning sexual acts. And it was just really demeaning, but I had no language at that time to counter it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
It's
just
that it's
everywhere,
that
isn't it?
uncomfortable feeling that you get in your stomach around something which is generally gender related or related in some way to sex, but not always just sex. And I feel like we should just, talk about that, talk about the fact that this is the stuff that happens to us. It makes us feel icky. We want to ignore it because we're not sure if it was meant in a certain way or if it's just a flippant comment. And actually, some of it's so normalized that you're almost like, well, this is how it is. And I think the big thing for me is if I feel disempowered and if I feel like I can't say something, then generally there's something happening. There's something more than just a, flippant comment that was made inappropriately. And it might start as that, but these things can lead into bigger things. And so if we, as women, allow everyday sexism to, come into our world, to come into our life, we're almost setting ourselves up in a way because the sooner we can speak up and say, actually, that's not okay with me, the sooner we can get back into our power and our truth and we can move on. Otherwise, it's like a big, massive pile-up on the motorway, like there's an accident happens and then there's a pile-up that goes on top of that. And you want to avoid it at all costs, obviously, but at the same time, we do need to be. But we can't talk about it if we don't know what it is.
Yes.
And so sometimes it can be really, offensive or invasive, but other times it's more subtle. It could be that person who pulls you in for a hug, and you don't want to give that hug, but even though you like that person, even though you respect that person, you're just not in that place. And so I think there needs to be this almost like aligning piece where we almost need to train the people around us who come into our world, to say, actually, I'm not going to give a hug right now, or I don't do hugs, or it's like there's something about asking for permission if you're going to come into the space or if you're going to touch somebody. And I think when we work in the coaching world and we're doing training work, we'll say, is it okay for me to touch you? Because we might put a hand on the shoulder or on the heart or something, because these are trigger points. And none of us know what somebody else has experienced. And if we go in there and start, like, imagine if we went over to them and started touching them, they'd think it was a bit strange, I would imagine. They may like it. I'm not saying that they wouldn't like it, but, there's just a point of going, hold on a minute here. This is your space. This is my space. If I come into it, let's be respectful, and I feel like every
I've got
day.
to say, in the post-COVID years when we started going out in public again, there was a lot of conversations about personal contact, and one of the companies had got on there. They got these lanyards that they said about people who are okay to touch, people who are like, I'm shielding. And others who were like, "No, stay out of my personal space." And I was just thinking, we shouldn't have to actually have that. We should just respect each other's personal space.
Yeah.
But yeah, just have those conversations, or if not, get a lanyard saying, "This is my space. Don't come in."
I know, and it's the thing is, it's kind of obvious, but it isn't obvious because
Mm.
it's been going on for so long, and women have just put up with it. And so many women say, "Well, I didn't say anything because I'm a woman, and that's what we do." We hold silence, we don't speak, and hence why we're doing this podcast, because there has to come a point in time when we acknowledge what is going on and say, "Actually, that comment is not okay with me. The way you're moving towards me is not okay with me. Please move away." But it can be hard when it's somebody who is maybe doing it, who's in a position of power or has an authority voice. It gets a lot harder then.
Yeah.
And there is an education that needs to happen, because I don't believe that everyone that does, that makes everyday sexism moves towards you is deliberately trying to do it. I feel like there's a lot of confusion perhaps and miseducation. So this is actually this topic is so huge. I think that's also part of my disassociation with it, because I just think, where do you even begin? Because it is absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, so I think we begin just by educating, and then in future weeks we'll go into the different nuances that make it so normal. So yeah, today the quest really is just to name this is what it is. This is what we're seeing. This is an example I've experienced, in the hope that it actually just alerts the listeners and say, I hadn't realized that. Maybe next time I'll be aware, and then maybe the next time after that I'll have the skills and the tools to be able to counteract that. But the reality is currently, if I experience it, I still miss it in the moment because I'm stuck in that triggered state of,
Yeah.
and by the time I'm like, oh, this is what I should have said, the moment has passed. So even though we know this, it's still a lot of work in progress. And also, I think a lot of it is just based around basic cliches that we've been exposed to our whole lives, that are just so buried deep internally that, again, we don't really realize. So, what cliches can you think of?
Well, as I was thinking about this, I went back to that old, Jerry Hall quote that said that her mother said, that you keep a man if you could be a chef in the kitchen, you could be a whore in the bedroom, and I can't remember what the final one
Yeah.
was. And it's this idea of like, you play these three roles and you play them well, and they cover off what men want, and then you'll keep your husband. And whilst I know that's absolutely ridiculous, because that's not the life I live or lead, and I certainly don't have that agreement with my own husband, it did affect me for many, many years, because I definitely grew up thinking that it was, it was almost a form of flattery for people to like shout out windows or beat their horn, or, make comments about your body. I mean, it wasn't, when I was very young, I didn't feel like that at all. But as I got a little bit older and I got more into, my growth, I suppose you could say, then it became more like, I have this body, I may as well use this body in a way. And I've learned that actually when we're confused by something, so initially for me, everyday sexism was very confusing. I did not understand why everyone was talking about my body. And because I was shapely and I had double D boobs, if you put doesn't matter how old that body is, in front of a man, they think sex. And
Yeah.
so everybody was talking about my figure all the time. And I was like, that was the worst thing in the world for me. It was deeply uncomfortable. I actually wanted to ignore what was going on with my body, because I was very, very young. And so, becoming a woman when you're in primary school is a very difficult journey. And then you go to high school and it goes from there. But as I got older, I thought, this is happening around me. This is happening to me. I'm going to have to deal with these comments. It's not going anywhere, and it's not going away, and it's not getting any better. So I might as well own it. And I learned that was about becoming a master of something that I did not understand. And so that jump from confusion and powerlessness became something that was more like, well, I might as well empower myself with it. And so I started to own it. But it still came from that place of, how do I make this okay for myself, because of what I was having to experience
Mm.
from, women talked about my body as well. So it wasn't just men, but it was everywhere for me, and I couldn't get away. So I thought, well, own it. And then I never forget, my dad saying to me one time, I was a Hacienda kid club. So I would go out clubbing, and we would all wear, me and my friends, we'd all wear the same things. It was a brand called Subculture, and it was like almost like wet look lycra that you could club and dance all night in, and you couldn't see that you'd been sweating. And it was short, skimpy, navels on show, legs on show, that kind of thing. And because of my figure, it looked sexy, but on the other girls, it just looked like young girls going out. It didn't have the same impact from that place. And my dad said to me, why do you always have to dress sexily? And I was like, I'm dressing like my friends. I'm dressing like I want to dress. I now know that was a bit of a warning. He was trying
Mm.
to sort of give me a warning of something that would come later. And I love and respect him for that, because he was subtle. Well, it was direct, but it was like, now I look back and I go, I can see what he was trying to tell me. But, I was a young girl wanting to wear what my friends wore and feel safe in that space. Ultimately, yeah, it's very, very complicated for me, because I
I
feel
had quite a similar experience. Even I think it might have been about a week ago or so, and my youngest was getting ready to go out to a party, and she was wearing an outfit, and my heart like sank as soon as I saw it because it was she's very shapely, but it was one of those where it was a bodysuit where I think the fashion at the moment is these bodysuits with really high reaching legs, and then she was wearing like hipster jeans, so she basically was just showing off all of her hips, and yeah, and I just said, I said, you look fabulous. I think you look amazing. I'm just really unsure about you going out in that into that environment. And I was really trying hard not to shame her, but like your dad, I was actually also trying to protect her because I want her to feel empowered and she should be able to wear exactly what she wants to wear. It is the fashion, but equally, because we live in an environment where unfortunately women aren't safe, and they are victim shamed and slut shamed, etc. I was also trying to protect her from that. And it's there was such, I'm yo-yoing the whole time, empowering them to say, yeah, wear whatever you want. And then the other side, like, but be careful. It's, yeah, it's
this is
tough.
the hardest. I think it's the hardest thing, because part of me is like, well, she shouldn't have to go out dressed like a nun, or like fully
Mm.
covered. Because who does that as young women? They want to go out, they want to feel free, they want to feel like they're in tune with their bodies. It's a time of experimentation. We all look back at pictures of ourselves and go, oh my God, I really went out in that. And that is part of growing up. It's that it is as it should be, and yet the world is evolving at a pace, and there's lots of good and there's also lots of bad, as we've been talking about. And yeah, I don't know, I feel like it's almost like, I think we have to get very clear and conscious with our conversations and about who's around us and what the dangers are, but also where are the safe spaces for women. Because if she's meeting up with a group of friends and they're in a safe space, then that's absolutely fine. But if there are other people coming into that space, it just becomes more complicated. I mean, no one should be going out looking over their shoulder all the time. I don't feel like that. And at the same time, we have to be real about what's going on.
Do you know what? Something similar happened to me in the workplace, and I was a department head at the time, and I have big boobs. And I was wearing I think it was probably a Marks and Spencer's white shirt, or maybe a Next. It was like, really box standard. And with women, it's more like a blouse, isn't it? And you could not help seeing my cleavage when I was sat down and somebody was stood up. So if they came to my desk, of course, they were looking down. My cleavage is there. There is nothing I can do about it. I own boobs. It does not interfere with my ability to do my job and to lead. However, somebody did take me aside and say, I don't think that's appropriate for somebody in management. I'm like, what am I supposed to wear?
Oh,
Literally, this is business clothes that are being sold in shops. And yeah, for a long time, I really did feel quite shamed about what is appropriate. And then I realized actually it's a you issue, it's not a me issue.
absolutely.
And I got back to my normal business. But it did, yeah, it's an everyday, and that's kind of like a cliche of everyday sexism about what is professional clothing. How do men behave professionally, and what is professional for women? And we've still got such a long way to go with
Yeah.
that. Even, me speaking up in a meeting, I'd be called aggressive. Or if I got passionate or angry about something that was happening in my department, I would be over emotional. Yet, if one of my male counterparts did it, they were like, oh, they're very strong. They're a strong leader. And it still vexes me to this day
Yeah.
that that's how it was. But that's the reality.
It is a reality. And I feel very much like we can go down many rabbit holes with this one. And we then make it about something that we've done wrong, when actually we're born into a society that has created this, almost like these roles that men and women play, and they're still living out today. And then by talking about them, we can say, well, actually, what's my role in this? How do I want to show up? You know, I feel like it's almost like blaming somebody because of the lipstick that they wore, or this where their skirt sits on their legs. And I'm very, very anti that, and I'm also very aware. So I'm trying to hold all these different contexts together. And then for me, it's about, as I say, I've got to read the room. I read the room a lot these days. Like, who's going to be there? What's the context? Um, what do I need to do to feel safe? But how can I totally express who I am at the same time? And if I don't feel like I can express myself, do I even want to be there? Is that a
Yeah.
space for me? And asking these questions, and that helps me to really, really define what I say yes to and what I say no to, and actually who I hang out with and who I don't hang out with. I mean, my friendship circle is so different to how it used to be, because a lot of the people that I used to hang out with, you know, I can't imagine hanging out with people anymore because so many things changed in my life. I'm not going out the way I used to go out. Everything is very, very different for me because I've started to be very conscious about my choices in a way that helps me to, when I do hang out with people, it's people that I know are on my wavelength, for number one. And I think it's easier for me now at this point, as this point in my life, to be able to do that. But it wasn't easy actually to lose friendships, to walk away from things. It wasn't easy to redesign my life at all. It was actually really, really hard. There was a lot of loss in there, but it feels good now because I only want to be around people that are genuinely empowering and genuinely there for me. And I do hang out with, if I think about men, there are so many incredible men who are feminists, who I know and who have brought so much value to my life. They're the men that I choose to be around, who I spend time with, who I invest in, and they invest in me. And thank God for them, because they've restored my faith in the masculine and in the healthy masculine that exists out there. But it's like, how do we then cope with the unhealthy? And this is what we're
Yeah,
talking
we need
about.
those allies, and I like to call them allies because they will speak up generally and name it or role model what healthy looks like. And we need more of those becoming visible, because the school and sports team banter is so prolific that quite often a lot of the men then go into public spaces, workplaces, and they still continue this banter. And we need, let's face it, the women can call them out, but it's usually a man that they listen to. And we need those kind of healthy male leaders, male colleagues to turn around and say, that's not funny, or that's not cool, or what's your intention with that? And just call them out. Because there's only so much work that we can do as women. We need everybody to do this. And it was really interesting. We've obviously seen lots of stats about um transport, women, vulnerable people on transport, and how much they are being scared, intimidated, assaulted. And just a week ago, my eldest was coming back from a trip, a summer trip, and it was about 10 o'clock at night, and she was on the train, and she was phoning me because it was near where she gets dropped off. And I could hear all this like laddishness in the background, and I thought, I'm not feeling comfortable with that. And so she wanted to stay on the phone with me, and so I'm like, okay, I'm sensing she's not feeling comfortable. Anyway, got to the station, and this group of lads got off, and they were probably no more than 18. All had a few drinks, going into town. And Bella got into the car, and she was like, "Oh my God, Mum, that was horrible." And they were making rape jokes and egging each other on about who would rape who, and oh, I bet you wouldn't have it in you, and all this kind of stuff, which was A, horrendous. B, the fact that they were then, it was part of their culture that they were like, normalizing it and thinking it was completely acceptable to talk on public transport like this. But there was another girl who was on the train with her, and they kind of like eyed each other, and they went and sat next to each other because they felt so unsafe. And the other girl did actually call the police, just to say, A, I'm feeling unsafe, but B, this is a group of lads who are going into town talking like this. Can you just have them on alert? And this is like when I say this locker
Yeah.
room banter, it was just horrendous.
Yeah, there's not, I mean, there's just no room in my heart or my head for that kind of behavior. And I know that the transport, they now have things in place, don't they, to help anything that feels unsafe for anyone. And that's absolutely right. But
Does
again,
it impact you traveling and how you think about traveling now?
yes, of course it does. I mean, I don't tend to go to many places on my own. I'm pretty awful with these things, really, to be honest. And I get nervous if I get into a taxi. I mean, the woman before, before 2017 was very different to the woman that sits here today. The woman before was like, I was always traveling. I was always on my own. I loved it. I got so much joy out of that sense of freedom and, leaving somewhere behind. That was a big thing for me. And I think I'm a bit of an escapist anyway. So yeah, absolutely. But these days, no, absolutely not. And I've deliberately steered most of my business through a computer screen in a way. And it's worked for me really, really well. And then I might get called out to do something, and, maybe I'll get the train down to London. And that feels like a major, major thing these days. And considering how I used to be, I'm almost like, wow, this person's very, very different. But I feel more safe in myself in a weird way. And, I noticed last time I was on the train that there was loads of empty seats, and then a man came and sat opposite me when he didn't need to. And I was doing some work, I was on the table, and it was a quiet carriage because it was a really early morning train. And I was a bit like, And I stayed there for a while and I kept working. And then eventually I just moved because I just thought, I don't actually want you in my space. I'm working. You're opposite me. You know how close things are. Maybe you just wanted to sit at that. But it was like you could have sat anywhere on this train and you sat opposite me. I don't like that feeling. Nothing was said. But I don't like that feeling of people coming into my space. So for me, that's a major alert. If someone actually comes into my personal space, I'm like, do I want this person in my space or not? That's step one. And then I'll take an action always, And I think as women, it's about women and girls, it's about actually saying, who do I want in my space? Because we've got this bubble around us that's 5 to 6 feet. It's quite a big space. And if someone is coming towards you, you know that they're coming towards your space, and you'll get an instant feeling as whether or not that's something you want or you don't want. So someone coming sitting near you when there's other spaces, and they could sit and have their own personal space, for me is a trigger alert. I'm like, what the heck's going on here? So I think there's an awareness of that as well. And what can you do about it? But first, you've got to know that you're feeling something that you don't like. And it's these micro aggressions. It might not involve any words at all. There might be no touch involved at all. But just by someone being in your space that you don't know, don't feel safe around, that's enough for you to maybe consider what you could do about it. They might
I
not
think
about
that's the
scary things
key.
like rape, but
Well, it's on a spectrum, isn't it? So it starts off with these microaggressions and the everyday casual sexism, these remarks, these cliches, the way that we're perceived in books or in the movies. So you've got this really low level stuff that is maintaining the status quo. And then you've got on the whole other side, which is obviously murder, rape, sexual assault, trafficking, all of that kind of stuff. And then you've got these degrees in the middle. And for most of us, we probably live in the casual everyday sexism and these microaggressions, but we need to be aware of them because that's the start of it. And unless we can tackle it this end and right at the top end and hopefully meet somewhere in the middle, nothing's going to change.
no, it's not going to change. And I think, I think we have to just talk about it, like I said. And it's thinking about even things like how business actually operates. If you think about, we talk about Hollywood, don't we? We talk about, women in Hollywood and what they've had to go through. And there's the women that disappear when they get to a certain age because they're invisible. But there's also the women that have to, the old casting couch idea of women that basically would have to go and sleep with directors and producers, the likes of the Harvey Weinsteins out there, to get roles, and then the way that they are treated, in these films and these environments is absolutely awful. And there's been a whole movement around that. The Me Too movement was really sort of speared off from that. And I think, but these things do cascade down into business as well. And, one of my earlier memories, although it's kind of like turning this one around from a different angle, was that I did some work experience at a PR company when I was 18, and I went to work at this company, and it was run by these two women who were like definitely elders, and I couldn't put an exact age on it, but I'd say menopause plus. And they were these two like high-powered women who were really amazing, actually. I was an 18-year-old girl going in there, not really knowing what I was doing, and they they were doing something with male models. So they were getting all these male models coming in, and they were like, right, the casting couch is over there. Go sit yourself down on the casting couch. And they said, guys, and I was really shocked because I was like, I've never heard it flipped like that before. And I was very young. I was very aware of everyday sexism because it was happening all the time. But these two women were almost like, I mean, they were joking. It was a joke. It was an everyday sexism turned on its head from their experiences, probably as women, that have had to sort of like go through the corporate world. They were working in very much a male domain as well. So chartered surveyors, solicitors, that they were their clients. And it still stands with me today. And I remember like going away and going, wow, that's blown my mind because I'd never seen it tackled like that. Now, it wasn't really fair on the young guys that were going in. So there's a part of me that goes, wow, that was really uncomfortable. And it was uncomfortable for me as well. And at the same time, it was like, just blew my mind a little bit. So,
wow. Yeah, just wow.
Trailblazing in that way, and yet not correct. You know what I mean? It's still not a correct, whether it's a woman said it's a woman or a man said it's a woman, it's not correct. But it is the world that it is more so women that have to go through these things. Yes. And we know there's lots of men out there saying, but what about men? But what about men? And we're here to say, yes, we understand that men are on their own journey. And however, we're talking about the things that really do affect women and a proportion probably of men as well. But mainly on the whole, it's a women's issue, and that's really important for me to sort of say that everyday sexism generally is a female issue, although I'm sure it affects men in places too.
Yeah, of course. There's plenty of things where we joke about men and belittle them, often in an act of power, trying to reclaim a little bit of power, but it works both ways. But they are usually things like naming man flu or saying, oh, they can never find their keys, or, oh, I can't ask them to, do the cooking because it will just be a ridiculous mess. So we obviously make these little jibes and it's still not helpful, but these are tiny compared to the huge scale of stuff that all women, girls have to deal with. And so, yeah, I think it's really important that we've had this conversation. And although we haven't gone into where this leads to, what you can do in the moment or how you can reclaim your power. How do you deal with everyday sexism while staying safe? Because that's going to come up next time, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's just, I think, to open this discussion, to talk about it from a very open place, it'd be really, obviously hoping that the listeners will be understanding this in a way, but also referring back to their own lives, to what their experiences are and how this shows up in their life, because we do have a personal journey to go along. We have our own bodies. A female body is a female body. We have certain parts of us that will have experienced everyday sexism and beyond. But it is a very, very personal journey because it goes back into that moment of going, oh, I don't feel comfortable all of a sudden. What was said, what was done, who's around me. It comes right back down to that, because we know when something doesn't feel right, our instincts tell us and we get an alert. And then that's the most important thing for a woman or a girl to actually tune into, to say, when does this happen to me? When does it happen to me? Who is likely to be doing it? What spaces am I in? When do I feel disempowered? And just really listen, because I think the awareness is the key to take us out of the situation that we might be in currently or in the future, because who knows, we don't know what's ahead of us. So we have to be ready and we have to be armed. The information lives inside our bodies.
So there's a perfect, almost like ending to today's session. So just to talk about next episode, we are going to be talking about this very topic, empowering ourselves when we meet these everyday casual sexisms, when we feel that feeling, when we know something is off. But I want to invite our listeners that while you're waiting for the next episode, why not give us a like, a share, tell your friends, subscribe, because the more you help us, the wider our reach will be, and hopefully more listeners, more impact, because we're here to do good work.
Yeah, and don't forget that you can contact us on Instagram, Facebook and TikTok, and join the private Facebook group as well. So you can send any of your shares, your concerns, anything you might need help with, any topics that you might want us to talk about. Please come join the private Facebook group. It's women only, and you can put anything out there and we will respond ASAP. Thank you so much for listening today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope that this helps you in some way. I'll see you next time.
So thanks for listening, and we can't wait to welcome you next time.
Until then, use your voice, journal, speak or sing out loud. However you do it, we hope you join us in
Saying It Sister.